As advertised by Jacob Rees-Mogg in the House of Commons yesterday, it is Talking Pints, and today I'm joined by Wilfred Emmanuel-Jones. Welcome to the GBNews pub.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's nice great to see you. I just love your story.
Thank you.
I love your story. I wonder how it all happened. You know, the boy that's born in Jamaica and comes to the UK and lives in one of the big conurbations of Birmingham. And yet, lots of things you've done in between, lots of very interesting things you've done in between, and we'll come back to that, very nearly a Member of Parliament, and it was a great shame you weren't, actually. How does somebody from that background suddenly become the rural Englishman, the farmer, the Morris dancer? What happened here? It's a fascinating story.
Well, actually, one of the great advantages of being brought up on society's dustbin heap is that there's nowhere else to go but up.
Right.
And as you said, look, I'm of the Windrush generation, so you know the story that, people like my parents came over in the 50s. I was left behind, and then when they earned enough money, I then followed, and I was brought up in Small Heath in Birmingham. And even to this day, I have absolutely no fondness at all for the place. It was the pits.
Was it?
And I'm from a family of 11, so there's 11 of us. Imagine this now, Nigel, 11 of us brought up in a two-down-terrace house. There are 3 of us to a bed. We were really, really poor. You know, I remember my mother having to try and feed 11 of us with 1 chicken. And it's not one of these chickens, I get at the supermarkets, which is nice and tender. It's one of these old hens that no one wanted, and so she had to cook it for days.
I shouldn't laugh.
But, I've now to this day got a fetish with my chicken bones because trying to get every bit of nutrition out of it. But because we were so poor, my father had an allotment, and as the oldest boy, it was my responsibility to look after this allotment. And this is where my story started, because this allotment really became my oasis away from the misery that I was surrounded in. And I can remember at the age of 11 that I made myself a promise that one day I would like to own my own farm. Now, it took me about 40 years to achieve that. But one of the things I like to say to people, it's very, 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 very important to dream early and to dream big. Now, you've been to the States, and the Americans really understand this idea that you could dream to be much bigger.
Sky's the limit. Yeah.
Sky's the limit.
Yeah.
So if there's one criticism I have to have about us being British is that we tend to be quite cynical about people who think that they could really rise above their station. But if you don't put it out there, if you don't dream it, it will never, ever happen. And every single thing about everything I've achieved in life, somebody has gone out of their way to help me make it happen. So if you're not prepared to put it out there, you will not meet the guardian angels who will come along to help you achieve those goals. So that, it may be a very simple thing to say, but it's a very, very, very important
this
thing.
is the most pro-allotment argument I've ever heard in my life.
Very much so.
But I think actually allotments have been very popular during lockdown, and I think people have been growing things, and people have been enjoying the big outdoors.
Well, there's nothing better than knowing that you are responsible for making something happen, that you see it starting off as a little seed and you nurture it, you care for it, and then actually you produce something that is edible. That is really, really fascinating. One of the things I read about during COVID, a lot of people started buying plants, house plants, and they were starting to start looking after these plants, nurturing. It is wonderful to be able to sort of nurture stuff because it takes you outside of yourself, really, and it helps you to connect with, there's this bigger thing than yourself. So I would advocate that all the time.
Well, I'm harvesting my carrots at the moment.
Are you?
Yeah. I mean, I don't grow a lot. It's fairly modest, but, do radishes and spring onions and a few tomatoes, and the carrots are
very,
looking
very
good. And I, it doesn't take much time, and I enjoy doing it. But interesting, I mean, from that background, parachute regiment, didn't kind of work out that well. But
now, let's be honest, I got kicked out of the polish. I mean, I was a real pain in the arse. I mean, you got to try and picture this. I'm a 16-year-old boy, left school without any qualifications. One of the disadvantages that I had at that time was that I'm dyslexic.
Which wouldn't have been recognised.
Would not have been recognised. So it's something I'm pretty passionate about now because I think there's a lot of people whose lives are wasted where they could be doing a lot more if people understood dyslexia. So, a 16-year-old black mouthy guy going into something like the parachute regiment, one or two things are going to happen. You either do as you're told, or you're going to get your head kicked in and get kicked out. I got my head kicked in, I got kicked out.
Yeah, and then television
television was quite interesting.
And you did well with television.
We see what was interesting about television, and again, this is all about having the courage to have the audacity to dream big. Because at the time, there were some fantastic programs on the BBC. And I decided, actually, I would like to go and work in television. So you can imagine, all of my family and friends thought I was nuts. As you probably know, that television then and today is full of the Oxbridge types, especially
big
especially the traditional
BBC.
Yeah. And exactly, so it was the BBC that I wanted to get. So a black guy from my background. How on earth did that happen? Now, as you could imagine, I tried to write to people, ring people, no one took my calls. And at the time, in fact, because I was living in Birmingham, BBC Pebble Mill, I went to the security guards and said, because they used to have these manual barriers that used to let the big, important people like you in and out of the building.
Get out.
And I said, could I help doing that? Because the security guards said yes, because they didn't want to get out of their nice, comfortable sheds. So I did that for months and months and months. I then met the cleaners, and I went to clean the offices. And I remember this guy, his name
Entryism, this is called. This is fun. Entryism.
Entryism. But the big break was a guy, and his name was Jock Gallagher, who was a big senior executive at the BBC at the time. And I said, look, I really want to get a job in television. And he says, look, you ain't the sort of person we employ in television because you don't have the education, you got a bit of an attitude problem. But he said, I don't know, he said, if he'd lived to regret this, but I'll give you a job as a runner for 3 months and then to see what happened. Now, that man, having the courage to give me that break, then started up a long career in television. And not enough of that happens. And the thing I hate more than anything is bloody human resources. Sorry, can you swear?
No, not really. But that's like one strike.
One strike. Right. Human resources, because what they do is that they would filter out.
They dehumanize.
They filter out all the stuff unless you fit into a very narrow framework.
And you must have a degree. And
so many people are wasted who have got talents because our system just doesn't. It's not geared to see the differences that they have. So that's how my career in TV started. Really, people going out of the way to give.
You first came onto my radar. I don't know when it would have been, 2005, 6, 7. This very flamboyant black bloke riding a horse in the English countryside who'd become a farmer, was supportive of country sports, and wanted to become a Conservative member of Parliament. I thought, what is going on here? But you were very flamboyant.
But it's all about breaking the stereotype. Because I'll tell you what my philosophy is, Nigel. My parents have earned the right. Because what happens with a lot of the black communities is that they feel as though that only the cities or the towns is the place where they could be. And I think it's part of our responsibility to branch out. If you want to work and live in rural Britain, you feel that's part of your soul, you have the right to do that. The great irony is this. A lot of people from where my parents came from are from rural backgrounds. They left rural backgrounds and ended up in the cities. But actually, they'd probably prefer to be in rural environments. But all the prejudice about what they expect they will find if they go to rural Britain. I can remember when I told people I was going to buy my farm down in Devon, people were saying to me, do they lynch black people down there? This is the idea.
And yet, what did you find when you got there?
Well, there's two things that I found. I mean, the urbanites thought I was crazy. The rural people just thought it was nuts because anybody in rural Britain wanted to get out of rural Britain and go up country, as they call it, go up country. And that they just couldn't figure it out, I'll give you, this is a really, really fascinating story. I can remember when I put up my first polytunnel, somebody called out the police because they thought it was a cover for me growing ganja. So when you're trying
that
to...
That is prejudice.
When you are trying to break stereotypes, when you're a pathfinder, it's confusing for people because it doesn't sort of fit what people imagine what a black person should be. The greatest privileges in life is to be authentically who you want to be.
Quite.
Rather than feeling that you have to belong or behave in a certain way.
So they called you the black farmer down in Devon.
Well, exactly. So,
but that wasn't meant as an insult, was it?
No, it wasn't. I mean, I think everybody tries to find a way of easily sort of communicating, I am black, I'm the only one there. It's an obvious thing to do. And what I've always done with my life is that, how do you use your difference as an advantage?
So you embraced it?
Well, I just thought that is a brilliant way, actually, to create a brand.
Yeah.
Because, and it was at the time, in this society we live in, everybody's really a bit nervous about political correctness. What is the right thing to say? What you can and you can't say. So I knew that when I decided to call the brand The Black Farmer, a lot of people, especially from the left, would be thinking, whoa, is that politically correct? I would say, well, what do you want me to call myself? The Afro-Caribbean farmer? It doesn't have the same...
But it's worked for you beautifully, hasn't it?
Well, it is, because actually it says what it is on the tin.
Yeah.
And also, what it also points out is that there isn't black farmers in this country. And the question is, well, why aren't they? Considering a lot of them did come from rural backgrounds. And the truth of it is this, is that most private farms, the guys haven't had to go out and actually buy it. It's been handed down through the generations. Or you would be able to rent or lease land from these big landowners. So whether you're black or whether you're from any environment where you're an outsider, it's always
very difficult to break it.
Very difficult.
I think that's right. I think
so it's about how do we create a system where we get new blood, because I think our industry desperately needs new blood.
I was very sorry. You came within a couple of thousand votes of being an MP.
God, yeah.
That was close, and you'd have made a real impact in Parliament. But it didn't happen.
No.
But your life's been a great success. And then leukemia strikes.
Yes, I mean, and I know it may be an odd thing to say, but the greatest gift I had was getting that cancer. And if you look at my face at the moment, you'll see that I've got something called graft versus host disease, which is something that, because I had the transplant, this is what sort of happens. So every day I look in the mirror, I know I'm here because of timing, because of science.
Yeah.
I should not have been here. So therefore, your perspective on life is totally different. So it's how do you live your authentic truth, rather than worrying about what people may think of you. And if there's one thing I could say to people is that do not allow yourself to get into a position where you nearly die before you start living your authentic truth.
On that deep philosophical note, I'm going to say, Wilfred Emmanuel-Jones, thank you for joining me on Talking Pies. We could have talked for hours, but he was great, wasn't he? He really was.
Thank you.